Okay. Hi, good day, everyone. It's now past 1 minute, so anyone that does not make it on time, they'll come later to catch up, maybe probably from the video. So really, we're here just to really share with you all. I and Chibu, we did some research and we figured that looking at the amount of losses expected from fraudulent transactions, we figured, hey, what way could we share with the fintech community? Because some of what our research told us was that you know the fintechs, they spend huge amount of expenses in terms of running their compliance and fraud strategy. So the title of our talk today is around leveraging scalable serverless cloud native solutions to address fraud and compliance challenges with machine learning, generative AI, whatever buzzwords you want to put into it. For We'll be co-presenting this talk with Chibu. So Chibu, she's a graduate student. She's doing her master's in software development at Boston University. She's a cross-platform mobile application software developer. So what it means essentially is she works with iOS and Android, applications. As far as this presentation goes, she will be the one really championing the solutions architecture portion. And she's our React Native expert. So if you have any questions while you work through the workshop, anything around React Native, by all means, just come to meet her. For myself, I'm not going to play so much role. I'm obviously joking. Um, my name is Chibu Ejimuda, or CJ for short. I was previously working with AWS as a partner solutions architect, essentially working with the AWS global partner organizations, helping their clients build their customer solutions and also ensuring the technical delivery quality of those solutions. I've worn several hats within the tech space. I've worked as a full stack dev, web and mobile stuff, done data engineering stuff. That's where, a huge amount of the Kafka piece and the Apache Flink piece, we'll be talking about it around data scientists, work with numerous type of, machine learning models, both worked on text, image, video, time series data sets. I'm also like a roboticist, so I also worked with hardware stuff. I've done things around self-driving, vehicles. So in terms of the entire tech stack, I've actually done different things. As far as this presentation goes, any questions around the solutions architecture space, big data, machine learning space, feel free to reach out to me for any questions. With that being said, the first things first we want to mention to everyone here is we'll highly encourage everyone to dive into the repo now. The reason being that, especially whenever you're deploying or provisioning big data infrastructure, it takes huge amount of time for those resources to provision. So we highly encourage everyone to head over to this repo right here to go through the README and especially start deploying. The transaction processing stack is what takes huge amount of time. So we highly encourage everyone to head over there. If you have a camera, you can take a picture of it. If you can, get it out, with the name. So with that being said, our agenda for today, first of all, is to really give you a sense of feel of why and why now we decided to, come up with this workshop. Talk about the different use cases, the fraud and compliance use cases we'll be addressing. Then lastly, I'll hand over the baton to my co-presenter, Chibu, to take us off on the architecture. And for, most of us here that are builders, I believe the hands-on session where you get to really appreciate how you can build all these different use cases. The reason why we, put up this workshop is that we realize that fintechs, they end up in terms of like the amount of fraud losses they incur. They incur so much fraud losses that up to some extent, when you also, I mean, you might also get to the point where you run out of business as a result of the compliance risks and challenges you face. So based on that, we were just looking at what are better ways that fintechs can actually deploy the solutions without having to break the banks, for it. Also, why we thought about that this was really great now is that it's estimated by like the year 2025 that the financial institution in general will be losing greater than $200 billion. So we looked at it as not just only why this is important, but also why now, looking ahead of time. As far as the use cases we'll be exploring throughout this workshop, they'll be of two folds. One will be the transaction processing and monitoring. The second part will be the compliance side. So starting with the transaction processing, I think the first questions I have for every one of you here is, has anyone heard about what they call the anatomy of the swipe? Anyone here heard about the anatomy of the swipe? So essentially what it means, just give an example. You want to go, you want to get something from a Wraps, or you want to go to Starbucks. If you went to Starbucks today to get coffee, the card you use in paying is what they call it, it's more tailored towards the issuer, the card issuer. So there's a card issuer, there's also the bank that is the issuer for that card. Then the terminal you use in transacting is more the acquirer. So you also have the bank acquiring entity, right? And what the transaction processing, why I was asking, if you have an idea about that, is that what the transaction processing does for you, because there are two separate entities, the acquiring processor and the issuing processor. But this transaction processing is what you can use for both, areas. Yeah, if you go online and Google the anatomy of the swipe, there's just like huge amount of article that can really dive more deeper about the different stakeholders within that play. But as far as our use case for this presentation goes, we'll go for like the transaction processing. So give an example, if you're a fintech, because typically fintechs might actually be working with a fraud prevention platform already. In that sense, they don't have to build in-house what every one of you today will be building. However, if you're like one of the key decision makers, you want to really understand under the hood how those systems are being built for you to, ensure that the fraud prevention platforms you're working with, they are addressing your own unique scenario. Also, too, you're also helping them really guide their product roadmap. Okay, conversely, if you're looking at building it in-house, this workshop too that we'll be taking you through is also a very great hands-on workshop that if you're a developer, a builder, you can actually build it. The other piece of the transactions use case is the transaction monitoring, which we see that even if you are even a fraud prevention platform attending this presentation, you will gain huge amount of benefits because with the transaction monitoring, that's where you get to monitor the different transactions. So for this presentation too, we have that as well, where you can learn how to deploy, do some ETL work to generate periodic reports you can deliver to your fraud and risk teams. The compliance side is just say, give an example, you're a new bank offering like lending or credit products. You often will upload highly sensitive documents. So the compliance use case will help address in scenarios where you upload such sensitive documents. It's being routed to a secure storage that adheres to the strict financial regulations of any jurisdiction where your product is. With that being said, I've been talking too much. I will hand over to Chibu to take it off for us.
So hi everyone, I will be talking on the solutions architecture. This is where we implemented the AWS services in our use cases and our infrastructure. So I'll be starting off with the compliance stack. We all know that in every bank application, we have to use our iPhone and our Android devices to authorize ourselves to use the bank application, maybe to upload the loan document and also to carry out transactions in the application. So here, what we did in our compliance stack is that we used React Native to build the front-end aspect of the iOS and the Android aspect. Then we also use AWS Cognito for the user authentication. Once the users are authenticated, they have to then upload a document to the right storage location. But before that happens, there is a Lambda function that is under the hood using large language model, which predicts if the data in the document contains spy data or not. And also the Lambda function here, it contains a PDF reader which reads the documents Then after it reads the document, it checks if it has sensitive data. If the document contains sensitive data, of course, it will go to the Pi data storage, which is a more secure storage location. And if it does not contain sensitive data, it will go to the regular storage location, which is accessible for everyone. So that being said, the compliance stack is actually addressing the loan document processing use case. So coming to our next stack, which is the transaction processing stack. As a payment processor, or if you are using a fraud prevention system, you will know that you'll be handling 1 to 1,000 users carrying out the transaction at the same time. And you actually need a robust system to ingest such huge amount of data. And that is where we have Amazon MSK to come in place. So Amazon MSK here under the hood uses Apache Kafka, which is an open source, scalable, big data infrastructure. What it does here is that it actually ingests the large amount of data. Then it hands over to our Amazon KDA, which is using under the hood using Apache Flink. So Apache Flink here is like an open source processing tool that actually processes large amount of data. And while the data is being processed, we have our Amazon fraud detector here that checks if the transactions are fraudulent or not. And once the Amazon KDA is done, the Amazon MSK, the second model that we have over there, then has like a Lambda function that ingests the data and sends it to two consumers, which is the S3 bucket and the SNS. So the S3 bucket here actually receives the data of the transactions, then stores it in the S3 bucket in the reporting stack. That's our next stack that we're going to talk about. Then for the SNS actually receives these status notifications. Once it receives the notifications, what it does is that, if we have a fraudulent transaction, for instance, the compliance and risk team will be like receiving the notifications of the fraudulent transactions. So what our transaction processing stack is actually addressing fraud prevention use case. So for the next use case we'll be talking about is the reporting stack. So for our reporting stack here, we already have our transactions stored in the S3 bucket over there. Because if we first spoke on this aspect, then we are speaking on this next aspect, and that's the last one we're talking about. So for the data being stored on the S3 bucket, the AWS serverless ETL, also known as Glue, then creates tables. Once it creates tables, the Amazon antenna then creates reports from those tables. Then it hands it over to the superset, which then analyzes and monitors all the transactions. So Superset here is an open source tool that's open source web application that displays visualization of reports. And Superset under the hood actually uses React.js. So this is our transaction. So this is our reporting stack. And our reporting stack is actually based on the transaction analysis and monitoring use case. So with that being said, we have, of course, we've mentioned a lot of things that is actually a lot for us, like is enough for us to actually ingest. So here is the question and answer sections. If we have any question, we can just raise up our hands, and we're here to answer your questions.
Yeah, so we've hello. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we kind of like, gone through a lot. So we want to make sure that, everyone, gets everything we shared. So open for questions, before we get to I want to believe, the fun part, the building session where we all read something. So anyone has any questions?
I do have questions, but I
Okay.
don't want to bring the class down.
No.
So,
No,
because I'm a non-techie, I'm on the business development side. So when I heard the environment of Apache, and I've heard open source a few times, I'm assuming that leveraging those technologies bring down costs substantially. Like every time I always hear open source, I say to my mind as a business person, oh, a solution that you can get for free, or you don't have to spend a whole bunch of money with XYZ software companies. But what was Apache? What did Apache solve? What was the problem it was solving that didn't, or what was the solution it was providing that wasn't, available before? It's not clear to me. So my first question is these environments. Why these environments? So like, why build things in Apache? The tool sets you used for open source. What's the driver behind that?
Absolutely. I mean, I will definitely answer that for you. So just to clarify and repeat, because I think the audience, we need to repeat the question so the audience really understand. So his question was more around why were we using like the open source components as part of the architecture we deployed. So there are like several folds. One is, the first things first has to do with, you as a business, what's your value proposition, right? If you lose about $1 billion from on fraud, right? Then perhaps you might want to invest in hiring the right personnel, right, that can actually use open source tools, right, to reduce that $1 billion you're losing. For some other businesses, they might be losing $1,000, and I'm like, hey, okay, we just want to take what is off the shelf, right? But what I would say is this: one great thing about working with open source is that your ability to innovate, your ability to dive deeper. So, I mean, looking at this fintech DevCon conference, it's more tailored towards like more developers. And again, in terms of, we also look at it more like it's a springboard for anyone that wants to innovate within the financial services space. The reason why, we're using open source. Nonetheless, another point I want to mention is it's also good as, a key decision maker within businesses, for you to understand under the hood what tools that, the vendors you work with are using. Because now, let's say, for example, you hear that, hey, Kafka now has integration with LLM. Guess what? It might be that you have like a vendor that provides you LLM, that you're paying for those services. But if you know about Kafka and you know that the vendor you're working with building your transaction processing uses Kafka, you can suggest, hey, why don't you think about, integrating LLMs or something like that? So that's kind of, the idea. But another thing again is, if you heard her, she mentioned something around the huge amount of users. So when you have like so many users doing transactions at a time, concurrent user, you need a robust, scalable infrastructure like Apache Kafka to process the huge data stream. Then the second open source tool we use, the Apache Flink. Essentially what it does for you, so it's called more like, it offers more stateful processing, in the sense that when you deal with transactions, you want to ensure that you are maintaining the session. You don't want it to be that, hey, somebody transferred $1,000, right? In a second ago, and they're transacting, $2,000, and those transactions don't go through. So it maintains what they call exactly once consistency. So it ensures that the transactions you perform, right, are the same transactions that go through. And I mean, one other unique thing we like about, Flink is there's what they call user-defined functions. because it's a user-defined functions. That's what you use in being able to integrate. Because she mentioned the Amazon fraud detector, because that's the only way you can integrate your machine learning, your algorithms to help you detect, fraud. So those are the reasons. Then, last but not the least, for Superset, the exciting thing about Apache Superset is that it's a big data visualization platform where if you have different data stores, so if you have like numerous data warehouses, if you have like data in disparate systems, there are plugins already that you can connect if you're running, a MySQL database or a NoSQL database like, MongoDB. You can connect all those different, data sources and run queries on them. So it's a very, robust tool and it's open source. You might look at it more like have you ever heard about an application called like Tableau or the Microsoft, what do they call this? I think Microsoft visualization. So it's essentially but the open source version, but a lot more, feature rich. And she mentioned something around it uses React JS.
Yeah.
So the exciting thing is that, for example, now you can customize so many things. If your in-house staffs, if they're already working with React JS, you can actually get them onto your data visualization team to create really really great visualization.
Helpful.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
So,
So, any more questions? So, do you have any other questions again?
no questions? What happened? I hope we didn't confuse people here.
Yeah.
Well,
So, since we have no questions, it's actually high time we get to our laptops and it's coding time. So, don't forget to go to this repo. Remember to clone the repo and follow the step-by-step process on the README. First of all, let's first deploy the backend. Then the next, after the backend, you deploy the front end. And definitely, if you need any help, I and CJ will be here to help you. If you are deploying the backend aspect, CJ is here to help you. And if you're deploying the front-end mobile aspect, I'm here to help you. And yeah. So once we are done, of course, once everyone has implemented their own part, we would actually give you a demo of how the product is supposed to look like. So that being said, yes.
yep. Like you said, we're really here to help every one of you. Besides, just understanding what happens under the hood, we also want it to be that you deploy it yourself, play with it. We have an extensive README that will really, really guide you on, how to, recreate what we essentially recreated. And yeah, we're here to, guide you through the process. So by any means, you have any questions, just reach out to us. We're here.
Can you go back to the URL? Yeah.
Oh,
There you go.
it's quite long.
And I can even head to it and I can even head to it and start pulling up the README, For all of you guys see it. So, ooh, my bad. Yep. Let's get, okay, good. Okay, good. Quite tricky way to. Sweet. So this is just the README now. So essentially, with all the stack we mentioned, compliance, transaction processing, reporting, and you just see like how to get around each and every one of them, the compliance stack, then scroll down transaction processing stack. Um, then, down to, what's the name? Down to the reporting stack. Then you kind of get a sense of feel of, how, the visualizations will look like for that and how to create it yourself. Then the front end mobile section, the React Native, how the app will look. So yeah, so yep. So yep. So yeah, we're here. One thing I want to mention, if you've gone down to this part, so there's a note that I highlighted here, in the sense that if you want to deploy the transaction processing stack, you also need to have trained the fraud detector model. That on its own is quite laborious. It takes a lot of time to do that. It's on its own could be its session. So what we did here was we have like a test data folder where we on our own results from those predictions, we have it on there. And another interesting thing too is that the most expensive stack to deploy is the transaction processing stack, and we're pretty nice people, so we're like, hey, we don't want you to incur a lot of cost in deploying the stack. So yeah, be careful when you get here. It's not cheap, to deploy it, unfortunately. It's quite expensive. So you can just go get the data, the results you get from deploying the stack to, the test data. You know, it's- So I would also be here starting up my own system too. Yeah, I want to deploy it right now too as well. Let's see. Just gonna show. So I'm actually deploying my transaction processing stack now. Um, and yeah, could take anywhere from around like 30 to 45 minutes for it to provision the different nodes and brokers you need for your Apache Kafka and Flink workload. So, but you don't. Luckily for you, I get to bear all the costs. You don't have to deploy it. So. So out of curiosity, anyone working here with a fintech, fraud prevention platform, payment processor? Oh yeah. Oh okay. Okay. Wait. What do you guys do? Oh okay. Okay. Cool. Cool. Nice. So we're just gonna come here and deploy this. Okay. So process transactions. I'm trying to remember we need those two different. Um, So I just started deploying the transaction processing stack right here. So if you look at it on this side of the screen, you get to see all the different. Wait 1 second. So you get to see all the different services that have been deployed on the right, right from the events section here. But yeah, from the event section, you get to see all the different stocks being deployed, but it's taking a while to. I'll try to refresh it. 1 second. Okay. Okay. So cool. Yeah, deploying. Well, it takes a good amount of time. So at least by then, yeah, would have had something up.
6 minutes.
It can take like sometimes 30 to 45 minutes to do the honors. It takes a long time. I was thinking about deploying it earlier. Since the workshop would take 1 hour and 30 minutes, we can deploy while we're here. So I'm curious, anyone here from California?
West Coast, Portland, Oregon.
Oh, okay.
I work for TransUnion, by the way. So yeah, we definitely have solutions in the fraud detection
Okay.
space and
Yeah.
continuing to build out capabilities in that area. It's really, really important for us.
Oh, cool.
In various environments, whether it be Amazon Web Services,
Google Cloud, yeah, GCP, Azure, Microsoft, yeah. What company did you say you're with?
TransUnion.
Train Junior?
Yeah, so we're global information services company. Credit reporting is one of the things we're known for, but
Okay.
we're a data company.
So do you guys feel like, because I know like, I mean, there's this company called TransUnion. You know TransUnion? Have you heard about it?
That's what I'm saying, TransUnion.
Oh.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm with TransUnion. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah, I know TransUnion. I do. Yeah, as a matter of fact, yeah, you guys also have, because guess what? I was thinking you're not TransUnion, because I was going to say, hey, have you looked at, AWS Data Exchange? Because that's where you can really, I mean, selling your data, right? You just have it stored in an S3 bucket. Folks, when they're training their fraud modules, right? Going through their loan decisioning process, TransUnion data.
Yeah, we're definitely doing those things. I focus on technology partnerships, and I take I would call it the distribution point of view. So the companies, whether it be fintechs or financial institutions or enterprises that would use software companies to gain access to our data, I work with those software companies.
I see. You're in the right conference for that. In the right conference. There's a lot of them. Yeah. So anyone running into any problems, any issues deploying yours? By all means, I am here. Use me. Oh, yeah. I had to convert her. She used to work a lot with Kotlin and Java.
Java, yeah, very long time ago.
Yeah. Now she's now like a React Native expert. So
Yeah. It's all that.
yeah, you have to switch soon.
Yeah, sometimes it takes time to install. Yeah. Okay.
So React Native it's a newer programming language. Why is it perceived to be better than Java?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question. Well, Java and Kotlin is based on Android, just Android. But React Native, you just write one code base is for both iOS and Android. You don't need to do Swift UI or Objective C. So once you just do it, it's for both of them, and that's how it makes it very simple.
Okay.
Yeah,
Know that, thanks.
yeah. It's quite very it's an interesting kind of programming language. It's HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and sometimes TypeScript. So it's something that you could learn just within few months. And yeah. Oh, I'm doing advertisements for React Native. My bad.
Yeah, React Native is, also got to put in a plug for the Angular guy. So Angular is more like, Google's version response to React Native, React JS, but yeah, what I love about it is what she just mentioned is previously you have to build like, a Java application for Android devices. Then now you have to build like an Objective-C or a Swift application for iOS. But with React Native, you can just build one and push it to the Google Play Store or to the App Store. But also, most of these programming languages, what people also tend to go after is the community, because it's not about just starting up writing the code, right? It's about when you run into those errors and those bugs, who can you reach out or pose questions to. And why Java is so great is that Java has a very strong community, right? That, whenever you encounter problems, but in terms of, building cross-platform mobile applications, React Native has a very strong community. Yeah,
Yeah, that's interesting because I do know that there are some things where we are building things in Java, and with me not being a technical person, I've always wondered why is that, so.
Yeah.
I joined a minute late or a few minutes, so I might have missed. Can you talk to me more about the kind of data you're seeing being used? Is it the UI? I know there's stuff, behavior that people do on the device, and there's identity, is this a good identity? And then you can also, if you have that data, try to correlate your transactions between different people that are like money laundering kind of situations. Are you addressing all of them? Or, I guess it's an open-ended engine. Whatever data you have, you can apply with.
absolutely. Yeah. So just to make sure I repeat your question and for the audience watching the video so they got your questions clearly. So your question is what type of analysis, right, is being done to create the fraud modules, if I understand you clearly. And also, does he address something like, money laundering activities, right? Like you kind of answered the questions. What this workshop was about was more like giving you an open slate of what you can do. So if you go through the workshop, you see like some of the data sets we're using, for example, in this case, is like the device, type of device. is the person using a mobile application or a web application, like their IP addresses, their zip codes, right? For this workshop, it's pretty simple. For the fraud prevention platform, that's why they are a fraud prevention platform company, right? They do a lot of crazy things. They might, get like maybe Neom, she might share what they do, but they do like it could be tracking the device behavior, right? How typically when you sign up, when you log in, right? When a user logs in, what process do they go through? Some people even could also measure, because your phones have what they call sets of accelerometers, magnetometers, right?
How you're holding the
Exactly, exactly, exactly. So some people go like your device behavior, right? People can dive deep like that. So that's the exciting thing about, because now that's where it'll be good you as a fintech, right? Like, hey, you keep on incurring these fraudulent losses, right? You can always suggest to, the fraud prevention platform you work with, hey, have you considered, integrating the accelerometer data with your model, right? The user behavior, hey, have you considered getting some TransUnion data to enrich it too as well? Because it's more about, at the end of the day, there's always a baseline of the accuracy you can get, but it's those that dive more deeper, right? If you dive, even you might now think about going down to your telecommunication provider. So now you're out of even the user device, the telecommunication provider, right? The location of their cell masks, right? Do most of the transactions that are fraudulent, are they coming from this particular, location? So you can dive deeper and deeper, Yeah, it was exciting. I caught up with like a couple of, really communication companies that are out here in this conference. Really exciting to me, because if you really look at it, right, so many of those, they could actually be the first, in my opinion, first fraud or compliance risk platform preventing, any of those fraudulent transactions. So yeah, there's just a plethora of things you can do. But what is key is when you're working with all these huge big data sets, streaming real-time data sets, you need like an infrastructure like we shared in processing them, analyzing it, running the model, essentially.
How does GCP compare to Amazon's Apache Kafka capabilities? Like, is there a kin, or do they have the same similar kinds of capabilities of being able to stream data, be able to do that efficiently, manage streaming, transactional data efficiently? Is there big differences between those two cloud environments with how they handle streaming data?
So just to repeat your question, right, for the audience. So his question was, is there a difference between how AWS handles streaming data and how GCP handles streaming data? What I can say is, first of all, I've not used a GCP managed streaming service. So what we share is more like AWS's managed streaming service. But what I can say is definitely GCP will have their own streaming service, and there are so many different variables, right? Interestingly, right, the data that that you're ingesting, depending on the kind of compression algorithms that you use, right, that could also determine how fast, right, the data is getting to your models. So there are just like a lot of different properties, right, that will determine, which one is better, right? And that's why the great thing about this conference is you get to see all the different tools. You get to suggest with whoever you work with. If you're working with the developers, if you're like a product manager, or you're, partnerships, business partnership or business development, you want to ensure that the vendors you're working with, right? Hey, do they know about this? What makes this better? Yeah, it's good. Your vendors or whoever you're working with, they will love such kind of educated questions versus, oh, you just tell me this is what I need, right? And I go with it. So yeah, so it's
You know, the how much will generative AI be a part of the, we'll call it the solution stack of fraud? Um, I got my own, a lot of questions that I'm curious about when I was listening to Neha and her presentation. Love it, but the questions I have is like explainability and, how do what tools are being given to all of us to be able to understand how it's learning and what, and how I guess from fraud prevention standpoint, maybe the notion of compliance isn't as tough to resolve as it is in the risk management side of the house where you're giving access to credit, right? Those are two different domains, really. So maybe in the fraud prevention space, there isn't as big of a bar to try to explain all the reasons why you take action before there's financial loss.
yeah.
And so therefore generative AI can be used a lot more aggressively, perhaps, in the solution stack.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Just to repeat your question, since this will be recorded. So your question, first of all, was, how could, generative AI be integrated within your fraud and compliance stack, right? And I mean, you're suggesting that it's likely more important in the fraud stack. Most important is more important, right? Integrating it with the fraud stack, right? From my vantage point of view, I would say that, so for this use case, we put up here, essentially that's for more like compliance use case, right? Getting out, sensitive data, PI data, personally identifiable information. However, there's a lot you might be not maybe working in another country, right, where it's not just only like a social security number, that is the personally identifiable information. Your generic PI LLM model might not capture that, right? So you have to actually retrain the models, right? Maybe ensure that you're grouping the right subwords, or you're tokenizing the right set of words that you can train your model on. And also, interestingly, in such cases too, you need like locals. From, let's be like, from such maybe country or from such, neighborhood to ensure you're customizing the model. So I see like, something like that, that would be like, very important. Then also in the part of, so that's more like compliance. But the fraud part, it's interesting because the fraud part is, I think if you heard what Neha said, she was saying there's now going to be a proliferation, right? Proliferation of more bad actors, right? That would take advantage of generative AI, to do certain things,
Scary.
which is scary, that's where, in my opinion, you might, without really exploring the space, there's just a ton of things that could be done. First of the things might be, hey, you need like an actual model that can always QC whatever, inputs you get into your, financial application, ensuring that it's coming from the right source. But yeah, it's quite, it could be, generative AI could be applied, in so many cases. But the key thing for me about generative AI is not about the buzz. It's more about how do you customize it to your use case, right? So not the generic models. You can obviously use the weights. So what they call weights is, because for to train your model for several hours, spend so much amount on your compute. Typical strategy for those that build custom models is they just pick up like the most important weights, then they now add kind of like one more layer at the end of the model. So what I was trying to say is that at the end of the day, it's how you customize it to your own business use case that matters the most. And that's why it's also good for you to understand how is it being built under the hood, right? You suggest to the if you're working with vendors, right? Or you have an in-house team you're working with, hey guys, you guys customizing this model, you could even ask them, hey, what's the base model you're customizing it off? Because interestingly, some models might be trained with texts that are non-sensitive, right? They might be trained with like, let's say, movie text, right? So you can suggest, hey, okay, why not train it off this base? So at the end of the day, it's more like how you customize your language, your large language model. That's what matters the most. It's gonna show you guys how much time it takes. So the model is still, the transaction processing stack is still deploying. It takes a ton of time. That's why I was trying to be, I'm not trying to be, I didn't want you people to go through this. And yeah, it takes quite a time. It hasn't completely deployed the stack, but it's still running. So then process, I guess what it's doing since, your Kafka, the MSK, Amazon MSK broker, we're using like two different nodes. So it's provisioning all those nodes, integrating it with the KDA, which is the Flink. Getting all of that to deploy together. I think right now, since it's on this private route, which is like the whole VPC, virtual private cloud connection. So it's more like a networking thing, ensuring that they're all working on the same network. So it takes some time. Um, I think yeah, we can do that now, right? But I want us to have. I want, Okay.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah, absolutely. Please go ahead.
I didn't bring a laptop, so
That's fine.
I'm not able to do any of this. But if I could sort of summarize
Mhm.
this, or have you summarize it, you're streaming data through MSK, Kafka, and you're using some Pi-related machine learning type of techniques,
Mhm.
and your main stuff that's coded, pure coding, are the Lambda statements. Is that a fair summary?
Um,
How
it
would,
has.
how would you describe it?
So essentially, so we're addressing like two different use cases, right? The transaction processing and monitoring, right? So the transaction processing and monitoring. For the transaction processing, that's where you, if you when you go to the repo, you see like there are a huge amount of there are YAML scripts, like CloudFormation scripts that deploy, like you mentioned, the MSK, the KDA, which is more like the Apache Flink for you, right? And some of the different Lambda functions helping you configure, especially for the um, Kafka brokers, configuring the brokers for you, right? Now there are two pieces of machine learning in this. The first piece is within for you to predict if the transaction is fraudulent or not, right? We use like a user-defined function, which is a separate. It's not a Lambda, but it runs with the Flink, Apache Flink, which is like the KDA, right? So once the transactions go through, so once that has been sorted out, the transaction processing, now it's more the transaction monitoring. The transaction monitoring is that you've now published the predictions, right? Whether it's fraudulent or legitimate transactions to it could be your data lake. In our case, we're using S3 buckets, right, for that. At the S3 bucket point, we now run a serverless ETL query, more like ETL stuff, right, with AWS Glue. Then from AWS Glue, there's also AWS Athena, which is serverless too, and cheaper than you spinning up your own, querying service, right? Then with the Apache superset, you're now able to do the transaction monitoring part, right? The monitoring and the reporting. So that's for one use case. The second use case now that is using an AI model, which is more LLM model, is the compliance. So the model you're using for compliance, you're not using it for the transaction processing. Transaction processing is different. For transaction processing, some of the reason why we use AWS Fraud Detector is essentially you're taking advantage of 20 years of Amazon combating like fraud from their e-commerce transactions, right? That's what you're gaining. But on the compliance side, there's already a pre-trained LLM model that we're using. So essentially, we're running the inference scripts and using the LLM models. So the LLM models built with PyTorch, what they do is just extracting Pi data, sensitive data. So in other words, if I understood your questions clearly, or to clarify, there are two models doing helping addressing several use cases. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Cool. right now, I want to share with you all, while we're waiting for the transaction processing stack to completely deploy, the compliance stack is up. So she wants to walk us through how we can do that with React Native. And also, she's going to share with us behind the scenes how the LLM model that we have in the Lambda is processing the data.
Okay. Okay.
Get ready, drag it
So.
out.
Okay. So.
Hurry up.
So I'll first be showing us how the application is supposed to look like after we're done deploying the backend and the front end. So for this mobile aspect, so let me just refresh this real quick. So this is how it's supposed to look. Let me. So first of all, of course, you would have passed through the sign-up process, and next thing is to log in. So once you log in, you log in with your credentials the credentials that you created. Then using your,
CJ.
sorry, my bad.
CJ.
So using your credentials to log in. Email, then your password. Okay, so once you've logged in successfully, then
Right, incorrect.
okay, sorry.
The T should be capital.
My bad. Is his credentials? So let me just type the right thing.
T, capital,
Yeah.
capital T, then S, EST, test 1, 2, 3, 4. And exclamation.
Okay, so I think I should type this.
Okay. Didn't go through. It should go through.
Okay.
Right. I'm not going to show you people my bank account password. So good. That goes, yeah. Submit.
So once that is done, then we're now into the application. So the application is supposed to look like this. And for the loan document processing, I had to create it on the profile screen. So what you have to then do is then you upload the document. This is for the compliance stack aspect. Then you click on here to pick a document. So we just have a document to just for this demo. Then you click on loan agreement. Then it's supposed to show the description of the document. So once that's done, we'll then upload it to our S3 bucket. So it shows a pop-up that the document was uploaded successfully. So this is where we'll now show you the S3 bucket,
Get a link.
the link of the document that we uploaded.
Okay. You can just go, not that, the CloudWatch. So if you go to CloudWatch, you just copy that. Yeah, copy that link and take it to, and take it to this other.
Okay.
Open the new tab.
So I'll show you here the link. S3 bucket. So the document we just uploaded is okay. It's loading. It's just that's this one here, which is today's date. Then click on this link. Once you click on it, it's going to show you.
It just shows you, how, first of all, you're downloading, excuse me. Yeah, first of all, you're downloading the LLM model, right? Extracting the different text, and then scroll down. Refresh it.
Okay, let me refresh this.
Just say control, 1 second. Okay. I just go control R, that's what I'm trying to do. Yeah, it's a challenge working with the mirroring thing, mirroring. So, there you go. So, I'm saying no space left on the device. Wait, let me see. let's look at it because we had. Maybe something that's kind of interesting. So, boys, because we look at here, right? We look at text. Um, so this. So yeah, it seems like on the lambda, because when you see this OS error means is on no space left unrevised and zero. So we can actually re-upload it. Because if you look at the last one here, right? Around, so you can just share this last one around.
Okay, so sorry. So this is here. We're actually using the large language model to tokenize the data, and if you look at the entity aspect here, for each these are the entities of the document in the document, and also we actually finished downloading all the tokens of the document.
Yeah. So yep. So if you also go to, can you go to the repo? The repo.
Okay, the repo.
No, yeah, that exactly. Then go to the transaction. I'm sorry. Go to the compliance folder, because I think when they see the code, they will really go up. So I want us to take them to the lambda code. Go up. No, go up. Go up. Go to the backend folder, then go to CS service, compliance service. Then if you go to the handler, yep. So as you can see, it's the same, the code of, like she's mentioning, right? Downloading the model, the LLM model, pre-train the LLM model, capturing any Pi entities you want to check. Then if you scroll down, you get to see like, you can ascribe any score you want. I mean, you can score, the entity to, you can score up to like whatever percentage you want to, query. You want it to return the results back for you. So if you look at what she shared, if you go back to the CloudWatch, yeah, that one, yeah. See the same, we'll log in the data from the Lambda function there, essentially. Yep, that's it.
Okay, so for the reporting stuff.
We need to start it up on the back end so we can show that too. Let's go. Wait, how many minutes do we have? 4, right? So it's good. The recording will be right here. Let me get this. Okay, so code. So, we see like we still have a lot to. I mean, it's running behind the scenes, but we definitely just want to, kind of share some. Because behind the scenes, there was a lot of inspiration, we derived working on this. We shared, so this like one of the references kind of like for the transaction processing stack, this blog post from this AWS, blog post. Interestingly, I never worked with this group, but it really inspired the transaction processing stack that we shared with every one of you. Then that's pretty much all. I want to really, thank every one of you for your participation. And yeah, there's a lot to cover, from the repo. If you have like any questions, by all means, feel free to reach out to Chibu or myself. And also, you can always connect with us on LinkedIn. We want to really thank the organizers and also the exhibitors for all the support throughout this event. And by all means, there are really great exhibitors out there. Make sure you make your way out to their booth and see. Neom is there too, right? Neom, you guys have a booth set up. Yeah, you want to go, check out all the great exhibitors, what they, have out there to, share.
Thank you.
Thank you.